Attention New York City listeners, I'm excited to share 2 upcoming live This Is Taste tapings that I think you're going to like, taking place at Rizzoli Bookstore in Manhattan's Flatiron District. On April 8th, I will be joined by Barbara Costello, better known through her Brunch with Babs social accounts. We will be talking about her brand new cookbook, Cooking with Babs, and on May 5th, I will be joined by photographer and journalist Craig Maude for a reading and conversation about his debut memoir, Things Become Other Things. I love this book so much and welcome you all in to hear his story about walking around Japan and so much more. Tickets are available at the Rizzoli website, rizzolibookstore.com. I hope to see you there.
So the pros and cons of a TikTok uptick is that, this business that wasn't doing as well, now because of this viral video, you have a line out the door. The problem with that is, you had one cook, one chef, and maybe 2 waiters. Now with this influx of clientele, you just can't handle that volume.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Jaeki Cho and Brian Lee are the co-founders of Righteous Eats, a multi-platform media brand spotlighting small immigrant-run food businesses in New York and beyond. They've racked up millions of views with thoughtful storytelling that goes beyond the typical food porn. And they've got ambitions for a whole lot more, hosting events and providing resources to empower business owners. Today on the show, Jaeki and Brian go deep on the Righteous Eats POV and plans for the future, plus some of their favorite spots in the city. Jaeki Cho, Brian Lee, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Glad
in unison, both of you guys side by side in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
I'm such a fan of the content that you guys put out. Before we started recording, I was asking you how you describe yourselves, and you said Instagram food TikToker, but I think that's kind of underselling the variety of content that you guys do, and I'm excited to dig into it today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Ask away.
I guess to start, I want to give a little bit of context into who you are and the kind of perspective that you bring to the work that you do. And I'm wondering if you could each tell me a food memory that you have from growing up that you think is kind of impactful or personal to you.
No, I think you should start it off, man. Y'all share a zip code and all that.
We do.
That's right.
310.
310, LA, West Side. So actually, I think my first food memory is actually from LA. My dad worked in the garment district in downtown LA. And I remember growing up on Santee Alley where he had a store. And I remember it was almost like the Nile River, right? Where there's so many different cultures, so many different types of people, so many people actually, just from everywhere. And that was the first time that I saw, fresh fruit, fresh mango with tahini and hot sauce. I had, Persian kubi day. I had Korean food. I had, alley dogs, right? The danger dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of the first time I was like, oh, wow, there's so much more food outside of what we're eating at home. And it's just from everywhere.
Wow, Santee Alley is not a name that I've heard in a long time. But I used to go there all the time as a kid, too. I would remember just digging through all of the bins of clothes and getting tacos in between. That's so fun.
That's a deep cut.
That sounds mad fun, yo.
Yeah, we should all go do that.
Digging through clothes and getting tacos in between. That's an awesome IRL event.
Yeah, Jaeki, what's your memory?
So I was born in Korea, but then I think I was about 6. I moved to China, Nanjing, China, and this was back in the mid-90s. China changed drastically within the last 30 years, or let alone 20 years. So this was when this city, majority of the folks were still riding bicycles. So I'm painting this picture to kind of showcase that. I remember after we moved, the first McDonald's had just opened in this city in 96. So one of my fondest, well, not even the fondest, but one of the most vivid food memory that I have from this time was we went to one of these hotel restaurants, but Chinese hotel restaurants aren't necessarily Holiday Inn, continental breakfast. I'm talking this is where the more luxurious experiences happen, where at least at the time that was the case. And I remember, like in this big, rotund table, all these different dishes from like turtle to, what I mean? Like some sort of a possum, I'm not even making this up. So it was just beyond the typical beef, chicken, and pork. And in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I got exposed to this at a very young age, and maybe that definitely had an impact on like my palate. You know what I mean? For me to be able to do what I do now, because I don't have as much hesitation about trying out different food. When you feed a 6-year-old kid, turtle, you know what I mean? At such a young age, I think like eating tacos under Roosevelt Ave for a profession is like a day in the park.
Yeah, I feel like kids that are picky eaters, it's such a tricky thing, but to me, I always have this mentality of what if this next food that I try could be my new favorite food and I just don't know it. And whenever I'm with a kid who's a picky eater, that's what I always tell to them and see if it's going to work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's a good way to try.
For sure.
So you guys are both kind of talking about cross-cultural experiences, which I think is really interesting considering that Righteous Eats is this platform that's highlighting all of these different like food businesses and creators from different walks of life. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about like where the idea for Righteous Eats came from and how it's developed over the past couple years.
Sounds good, yeah. So during the pandemic, so Brian and I, we both had like previous lives that weren't being active TikTokers, Instagrammers. But during the pandemic, as many of us, we were cooped up in our homes. I happened to be cooking a whole lot more than I do now. And I was always active on social media, but it was never taken to a point where I was like, this is going to be my bread and butter. But I started making these TikTok videos that were amassing a decent sized following. So at around like 300,000 followers, putting up a cooking video every day for about 30 days, I hit this guy up who used to be a music manager. So he used to manage a number of artists, notably who currently goes by Anderson .Paak.
I've heard of him,
because he used to go by a different name when he was managing him. So another friend of mine, Dumbfounded. So I knew him through the music world. And he had moved to New York from LA, and he had, successfully exited from these 2 previous companies that he had built and also worked with. So I just kind of was like picking his brain like about doing, actually a podcast network. And he thought that idea was dumb. And but he was like, but I see you doing this thing on TikTok with this food content. I think you should lean into that. So we started brainstorming these ideas, and one of the things that we talked about was how during the pandemic, a lot of these local mom and pop restaurants that are frequented in New York, especially in places like Queens and Brooklyn, these restaurants just didn't have the wherewithal or the infrastructure to gain access to PPP loans or let alone EIDL loans, all these loans that some of these infrastructures and restaurant groups that had better understanding of their accounting were getting access to. So they were just surviving by the thread, and many of them had to shut down to some point. So I was like, hey, I have a little bit of a following. What can I possibly do? So why don't I just start highlighting these eateries and see if I could help drive some traffic to these restaurants? So that was the genesis of Righteous Eats. And throughout that process, I've learned that, because I wasn't so familiar with this food content creator, influencer, quotation mark, industry that had existed. Because I would hit up a restaurant and I would, I want to get in touch with the owner because I didn't want to, our intention was never to review a restaurant, right? Like, because, what authority do I have? You know what I mean? Like, your boy's not Pete Wells. You're like, I don't know, all the details and the what goes into running a restaurant. I don't know these things, right? So, like, I never thought that I had the authority to be able to review an eatery. But I wanted to highlight and champion these restaurants. So when we called these restaurants, like, one of the first things that they would ask us was, so how much you try to charge me? And my immediate reaction was, nah, like, I'm trying to come, pay for the food. I just want to have a talk with you to learn what situations are you going through right now because of this pandemic and, how that is affecting the F&B industry overall, And, 4 years later, we're here talking with you.
Yeah, you're on a podcast after all of your efforts, Brian.
Pretty much. Back in the podcast is cyclical. Yeah.
I feel like it says so much about the way that some creators operate that these businesses thought that they wanted them to pay you to be on it in the first place. And I guess, Brian, I'm interested what drew you to wanting to develop this project, like based on the work that you were previously doing. What kind of opportunity or like excitement did you see in this kind of food content world?
I mean, we talked about Santi Alley earlier. If I'm just being super real, all of this is house money. Like, this is our way of being able to give back because my father had a stall in Santi Alley. I grew up without access to any of these things, but through some sheer luck and just sort of being at the right place at the right time and working hard, we're in this position now. And we have a certain bit of access and expertise, and it's our way of being able to pay that forward, right? And that's really what it was. When he amassed a following online related to food, we also read that 1 out of every 3 restaurants in New York were going to close forever. And as someone that is very passionate about food, food is like, after my first exit, I essentially just traveled and I tried to spend as much time just like unplugging from the world before. And a lot of that was revolved around food. We would travel to certain places and do all certain types of things. But all of that coming to a head, I'm like, well, why is it that certain restaurant groups and certain people with means and access to all these different tools and all of that, they're going to be okay. But the people and the foods and the small businesses that we were a part of and that were in our communities, how come they weren't going to be okay? So for us, it's like, okay, well, how can we combine all our powers, all our expertise, and really use it to help the people in our community? And that's really what it is. It was just our way of really giving back. I started my career in investor relations for Broadcom, right? So I worked in corporate finance and investor relations for one of the world's largest semiconductor companies. And when I was there, I saw that, oh wait, there's comms teams, there's people understanding how to shape and really control narrative. There's a whole thing about that. And now during the pandemic, there's all these people in the community. And I also worked at a place like Group 9. I advised and worked at a place like Group 9 that has, at the time, the largest publisher in Dodo. Like, I come from this world where I understand that knowing how to control your narrative, knowing how to use the tools, knowing how to get seen and really platform yourself can make the difference between being successful or really struggling. And for us, that's what Righteous Eats is. It's making sure that the people and the businesses in our community have access to that. At least that's what it was when we started.
Yeah, and help them platform, right? Because I think phase 1 of Righteous Eats was awareness. My mom, her family had a restaurant, and one of the trajectory for a lot of Koreans in Korea is that when a man usually, and at this time, this is during my grandpa's era, so when a man retires, he gets a check, a retirement fund, and then they go and open a fried chicken store, a fried chicken restaurant, a takeout joint. That's still a very common thing in South Korean culture. So my grandpa had a ox bone broth restaurant, a seolleongtang restaurant, that unfortunately failed in like 2 years. And I was a kid. I was living with them at this time, and seeing a failed restaurant, firsthand, and seeing so many great restaurants that I personally loved growing up in New York, just failing and closing, and never really getting adapted to with the times. And we really thought hard about, like, how can we share their stories first? Because oftentimes, majority of the job isn't in just the food, right? The food is just the bare minimum. Everything else that needs to come along with it, the experience. But really, in the social media age, is storytelling. And So we figured, okay, now we have a little bit of a platform. Let's see if we could bring awareness to these eateries.
But back to your question about approach, I do think that it was very conscious counter programming. Because I think up until that point, even if those businesses or the foods or the cultures and cuisines were being highlighted, it was always highlighted in a way that was very, very much, fetishized or spectacle, right? So it was someone else coming in and saying like, oh, so just to paint the picture, in 2020, most of the food creators at the time, that was very much spectacle and sort of a caricature of like the biggest pizza, the cheese pull, the cheapest. What it was very much that. And what we wanted to do was we're like, actually, let's go into nuance. Let's slow it down and go into the kitchens. It's not just about, this topped with this, topped with this. It's like, okay, let's actually show the people that are making the cuisine and why they're making the cuisine and where it actually comes from. And at the time, and now, frankly, even that's become very normalized, which we think is really, really great. But at the time, that wasn't the case. That's why when Jaeki would ask, can we get into the kitchen? They're like, why? Are you going to report us? Like, what's going on? Especially for the types of restaurants that we were covering.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, it was during like BuzzFeed had a huge influence on this, right? Listicles, spectacle food. And obviously that culture also came from the previous stakeholders, which is Food Network. And, if you ask like a Food Network executive, it's like, yo, what do you do to get ratings? It's like, yo, bro, cake contest, pizza, burgers.
Yeah.
There you go. You know what I mean? So and that landscape and that culture was pretty much the norm on social media as well. And especially in short form content at this time, we didn't see actual conversations being held with the people behind the food. It was very much where to get the cheapest food, where to get the biggest donut, the biggest cronut, the biggest croissant, like everything the biggest, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, how can we actually make it more about people behind the food, not just the product that they are serving you, you know what I mean? Because, at the end of the day, people want to relate with stories, The utility of the biggest food could only go so far.
Yeah, you can't really eat the biggest cronut every week.
Pretty much. And I'm sure there are people that are out there that could do that, but,
I'm Nomi Fry.
I'm Vincent Cunningham.
I'm Alex Schwartz, and we are Critics at Large, a podcast from The New Yorker. Guys, what do we do on the show every week?
We look into the startling maw of our culture and try to figure something out.
That's right. We take something that's going on in the culture now. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's a book, maybe it's just kind of a trend.
And we expand it across culture as kind of a pattern or a template.
Join us on Critics at Large from The New Yorker. New episodes drop every Thursday. Follow wherever you get your podcasts.
As the summer travel season approaches, I'm excited to let you know about 2 upcoming Taste Travels, our immersive travel series hosted by cookbook authors and me, Matt Rodbard. On June 15th, I will be joining the Mediterranean dish author Suzy Karache in Barcelona for an incredible week of culinary tours, cooking classes, and plenty of wine and jamon. And on September 15th, I will be joining author and baker Mauricio Leo of The Perfect Loaf for a tour of northern Italy. We will visit artisanal Parmigiano Reggiano and balsamic vinegar producers, take a masterclass in the art of panettone, and of course, eat plenty of stuffed pasta and mortadella in and around Emilia-Romagna. Both trips are nearly sold out and closing soon. If interested, write into hello@tastecooking.com and we will get you the information. That's hello@tastecooking.com. I hope to see you on one of our taste travels this summer.
I want to talk a little bit about impact. I think a lot of people talk about the TikTok bump when a restaurant gets highlighted and there's a big influx of customers. And then I think what happens next kind of varies. Like sometimes they get regulars. Sometimes it's so blown up that people who used to go there don't go there anymore. I'm curious if you guys speak with any of the people that you feature, if you have any sense of what happens, like what's the afterlife of a video that you put out?
So, yeah, we talked about this quite often because we do see this initial uptick. So the pros and cons of a TikTok uptick is that, this business that wasn't doing as well, now because it is viral video, you have a line out the door. The problem with that is, you had one cook, one chef, and maybe 2 waiters and 1 host. Now with this influx of clientele, you just can't handle that volume. And as a result, you have to now go out and hire these new people. But when the uptick goes up and then it goes down, now you're left with all these new hires that you still have to pay their bills, right? So that's the pros and cons of what this, like a TikTok bump. And we're very cognizant of that. So what we try to do is we try to check in. And if we feel like this particular video is going to go a lot further than some of our other videos, we try to give them a heads up. It's like, listen, like, I think you might see a line on this weekend. I think you should probably be prepared a little bit. And if you sell out, just say you sold out, and if people start complaining on Yelp, on Google reviews, like, don't take it personally, you know what I mean? Like, because that's part of the game as well. But yeah, like, there's only so much that we could do to help. We do try to check in. We do try to ask, hey, how you been? How are you doing? Has there been any sort of, updates on what's going on? Some of the restaurants have been able to adapt with this new influx of audience, and they actually have created social media channels of their own that they have utilized to now opening up more businesses. Some of them, as many things go, like, they weren't as keen on it, or they just didn't have the right resources. Like I wouldn't say that they're back to where it was, but they have to find new ways to adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the overall impact is positive. I think obviously there's going to be those cases where people aren't prepared, or they might not have the infrastructure to continue to sustain and thrive. But that's something that we try to be very deliberate and conscious about. Phase one, as Jaeki was talking about earlier, was platforming and just making sure that these small businesses and restaurants are seen and known. Phase two is really being able to drive sustainable revenue, whether that's, just from the video or us holding events. We hold a ton of events, right? Whether it's with a brand sponsor, buying out a restaurant, us hosting happy hours where we're trying to go during the shortest or the slowest time, inviting them to cater. Penguin Random House might come to us and say, hey, we're looking for people, right? Being able to do that. And then phase three is really making sure that they can have the infrastructure and the systems in place to be able to sustain that, not only for now, but forever, right? So it's like, it all goes back to the cliche and trite adage, you can catch a fish for someone to eat for a day, but if you teach that person how to fish, they can eat for a lifetime. And that's really what we're trying to do, whether it's, them tapping into social media, them, really understanding, we need more robust systems. How are we looking at loyalty? How can we be more efficient with, like, our POS, delivery, all of those types of things?
Yeah, I really like to hear that, companies and places are reaching out to you and using the knowledge that you've amassed as creators to try to ask, like, who should we be bringing on to do these things? And I saw last summer you guys curated, like, a smorgasbord festival. I was curious, like, how you approach putting together a festival lineup of food vendors in a space. Like, do you want to hit on certain cuisines, or are there, like, restaurants that you really just wanted to have the opportunity to eat more of their food? How did you put that lineup together?
Yeah, so Smorgasburg had reached out to us. I mean, that whole process, would you say that it took about, like half a year? It
took half a year, but I think the Smorgasburg thing is just a microcosm of what we've always tried to do, which is meet and be in the community, right?
Yeah.
So, whether it's a 1-year anniversary at, the Samsung 837 space where we have a block party, or Jaeki runs the marathon and we take over MoMA PS1 and have, like, a pre-marathon sort of thing.
Yeah.
Events are I think being in the community, IRL, and actually being in the streets is something that's super important for us. So when Smorgasburg approached us and said, hey, do you guys want to do something together? It was a long haul, and certainly the feedback loop took a lot longer than we had expected, but it was amazing, right? Because it was a way for us to pick vendors that might have been overlooked, or the nuance may have been, just missed.
And also vendors that probably didn't have some of the infrastructure to be participants in a festival like Smorgasburg. So the 4 vendors that we selected, one is it's a family that makes these Mexican ices, and they do it out of Bushwick in the corner, And they do it in the traditional process of rotating this tub physically and turn it into ice. Like it doesn't use any sort of refrigeration. They didn't even know what smorgasburg was, right? Because there were just so much of a local legend that, like the ideal of scaling it to a food festival was a foreign concept to them. But we wanted to bring them on because we wanted them to be on a bigger platform and introduce these incredible things that they've been doing to a wider community. And this other vendor was my boy C. Marty. He's a self-taught cook, Jamaican ancestry, so he's nasty with it with the jerk chicken, but he was able to come up with this dish that utilizes jerk chicken on a banh mi sandwich. And he's been doing pop-ups all over the city, but for whatever reason he'd never gotten accepted to Smorgasburg. So I always thought that it would be a great platform for him. So it was him, and then there was a family of brothers. So they have they have a smash burger business that they have a food truck. They run it out of a food truck, but they serve halal smash burgers. And again, I believe one of their goals was to get into Smorgasburg. So for whatever reason, they couldn't have the opportunity, and we thought that I don't think Smorgasburg, and I could be completely wrong, but at least during the lineup last year, there wasn't a halal option on the menu. So I thought that it would be a great opportunity to showcase their food. And last but not least, this young lady, she serves kanafa, and she's from Palestine and based in Jersey. And again, like Smorgasburg was also like a foreign concept to them, but she just started this catering business, and I thought her story was extremely compelling. And the kanafa that she was serving, which I tried before we decided to have her as one of the vendors, it was incredible. So I thought it was only right to have her as an option.
By the way, we should shout them all out by name because this is a platform.
Yeah.
So
sure.
Zaytoon Catering,
Halal
Urban Bistro, The Hub,
Halal Urban Bistro,
Nieves
C.
Cortez.
Marty's Jerk,
Yep.
and Nieves Cortez. Yeah, so shout out to all of those guys. And the thing that we set up was we didn't want any of them to pay for anything except for the food that they had to bring and sell. So they kept all the profits. So our deal with Smorgasburg was we get to select these vendors. We get to have a section to cater to them. But we also don't want you to charge them for a fee to participate in this one-day event. So in many ways, like, we lost money doing this event.
Yeah, I want to be clear. We didn't get paid by Smorgasburg.
Yeah, we didn't get paid by Smorgasburg. And we also didn't bring a sponsor on because we also didn't want to be tampered on our selection of which vendors that we want to choose. So, yeah, like, it was, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it was a great community event. I think we had about 30,000 plus people show out.
14,000 people.
14,000. That number was a little, was off by a huge margin.
It felt
Double.
like 30,000.
Yeah. It definitely felt like 30,000. But yeah, it was like 14,000 people showed up. And it was a huge turnout. But it wasn't something that we did for monetary purpose. It was really something that we wanted to do to give back and connect with the overall community.
Yeah, I really respect that. And what you're saying earlier just about how you do all these different kinds of events. I think there are so many people who create like virtual spaces for people to gather, but not in person. And we lose so much humanity and common sense and all of these things when we're just like interacting in a comment section. And so I think that's something really distinctive that you guys do, which is cool.
Yeah, I always tell people, hey, if you have an issue, come meet me at my run club.
Yeah. And I want to point out, we're trying to evolve and constantly spread that utility even further, right? So like with the food festival or a block party, our community can eat literally, usually for free, and then businesses can make money. And
the brands get their deliverable.
And the brands can get
if
deliverable.
It's a collab.
If they're sponsored.
With a brand, yeah.
One type of event that I think is truly new and novel and something that I'm very proud of is we actually did a seminar at Meta where we invited 200 restaurateurs, small businesses, to the Meta offices. And by the way, again, we might be jaded being able to come into a fancy building that has, espresso from an iPad. But for many people, being able to go to a commissary that has unlimited food, unlimited bottled drinks, this is like a new experience. So that's cool in itself, literally being able to be in that space. But I think what's also cooler is being able to meet with the Instagram product team, the people that are actually making these tools that it can be so instrumental to your business, meeting with them, understanding directly from them what the best practices are, how to use those tools. And then on top of that, we invited in, Chef Esther Choi, we invited in all these people that have leveraged the platform. So it's not just a ephemeral sort of like pie in the sky thing, but an actual case study where people talk about like, no, this is something that you guys really need to pay attention to. Look how we use it to completely build our empires, right?
Yeah, and to be like, if anything, I realized that I was jaded, right? Because I didn't realize how much of info that the Instagram team was sharing with the restaurateurs that attended the seminar that I took it for granted. I just look at it as like, yeah, this is an obvious thing. Everybody were so in tune and they were taking notes. And, something as simple as, I think one of the things was, utilize your profile bio section as your signage. Like, so you should have your phone number in there. You should have, details about what food you're serving. Things that is like an obvious
Your
thing
hours
for
of
us.
business, yeah.
Exactly. Like things that are obvious things for us. Many restaurateurs never even thought about that.
Yeah, and I think it's funny with food and mom and pop shops because sometimes like, I'll go to crazy lengths to figure out if the like Jamaican place in my neighborhood that I get takeout from is open because they don't have social media and they don't answer their phones sometimes. And
they'll yell at you.
Yeah, no, they do yell. And I'm like really trying to be on their good side because I picked up my food a little late one time.
Right.
I was like, oh, this is it for me. Like no more oxtail. But I'll just walk over and see because like that's how much I care about eating that food. And I do think like restaurants that have regulars and have a community, like they don't need to be on Instagram to have those regulars show up and go for them. But if they're trying to, reach that next level of business, if they want people coming in who don't know about them, like social media really is the best way to do that.
And by the way, it's not that we think that every business should strive to scale. It's just that like when we're in these spaces, it's being able to provide them the access if they wanted to and the understanding of what's going on, right? Because I think regardless of whether or not they're trying to go from, a single location to a multi-unit franchise with 500 locations, I think them understanding the landscape and what it takes at each level, if they wanted to opt in, is very important.
Yeah,
right?
Just giving them the options because one of the restaurants that we highlighted, Avelias Tamales, this young lady, she came to America by sheer will. So she went back and forth between the border physically multiple times. And she, worked at a fast food restaurant. 9/11 happened, lost her job, ended up serving tamales in the streets of Jackson Heights. Through sheer will, dedication, hard work, a lot of money saved up, she was finally able to open a brick and mortar restaurant. Somebody like that, like, it's not that they're not willing. It's just that, they just don't have the information. They don't understand, like, they just don't know what the landscape and the capabilities and the possibilities are. So at least give them the information that, hey, if this is what you want to do, this is a possible thing for you. I mean, because with your work ethic, forget about it.
So talking to her and her son about, oh, what are you guys doing around delivery? Oh, what are you guys doing around national orders? And it's like, oh, Goldbelly. Oh, yeah, we're on Goldbelly. Hey, do you have any aspirations to do CPG? Like, have you ever thought about distribution through like a large retail? All of those types of conversations we want to be able to facilitate, not only spark the information if they don't know about it, but also potentially spark the introductions to like the co-packers or the distributors or whoever it might be.
If they're interested.
If they're interested.
Like,
Yeah. That's the thing also of what's interesting to me, not to bring it only back to social, because I appreciate what you're saying about all these kinds of access, but there's also the fact that like people don't choose to be the subject of someone else's video sometimes. And you guys are saying, hey, I want to interview you and put this on this channel and this is what might happen after that happens.
Oh yeah,
but,
we don't do the whole like okey doke sneak up on them.
Yeah, but other people
Nah.
do. And then like you don't even know that a video has gone viral. And then the next day at work, there are all of these people who you've never seen before who are like clogging up the business. Like things are just kind of Wild West out there.
I think, so I was having this conversation with a friend. So I worked as an editor, a journalist. I don't really like to say it because, the time that I spent was pretty minuscule, maybe like 4 or 5 years max. But, I learned about libel. Like I went to, journalism school. So like there is a level of media literacy that you learn from that training.
Yeah.
But with social media, like everybody could essentially be their own TV stations, but they didn't go through that same training.
Right.
They didn't understand. They don't understand. It's like, yo, like, that's not a fair use case right there, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you could just put this person's face on without consent. Or maybe you should think about it from an ethical perspective. So, I think these are all like things that I really wish start to get implemented into school systems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also something that we try to be very conscious of. But the reality is, I don't consider any of that to be. It's always funny going into these fancy places, and they're like, "Oh, we should put you in touch with our social team," or "We love what you guys are doing on social." And my response to that is, "Thank you," but it's not social. It is the media now, right? It is the platform. People, whether they're consuming podcasts or TikTok, I think more than half of especially young people consume their news on TikTok now, right? And we're millennial. Most of them are consuming that on Instagram.
Yeah, Gen Alpha is consuming it on live stream,
right?
Yeah.
So it's not social anymore. And so, we uphold and love and honor sort of the standards of it all, but how can you apply that in this new space? That is not a new space, it is the space.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I want to talk about a topic that I've been seeing you guys do some cool videos about on, I guess I'll just say the media now, which is like third culture cuisine and third culture cooking. And I'm wondering if you could just maybe say a little bit about how you would define that for someone who's listening who isn't familiar, and what kind of draws you to kind of doing coverage in that space.
I think it's the natural evolution of where food and society are, right? And food is a microcosm of society. But I think, when food media first started, it was about, well, food could be more than sustenance, right? So the Julia Childs of the world, you could say, oh, it's great. And then it became about the next generation came about, okay, well, the people that are preparing it, they could also be food celebrities or like rock stars, right? And then so now you're getting into that.
You got bam.
Yeah,
bam roll,
exactly. Right? It can be an art. It can be an art form, right? So then you started to get that. And then it really became, okay, well, now not only is it an art form, you can go and use it as a window into all these different places. So then you started to see sort of the next versions of food, which were, hey, did you know, like, you can go to Vietnam, you can go to Italy, you can go to France, and that's sort of what we see.
Yeah.
The Bourdain effect.
And
Exactly.
Zimmern, like going to Mongolia, eating like tripes, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But now in this next generation, and this is sort of the idea that we had in this next generation. The world is so small, for better or worse, and we think for better. It's so small. So now when you're going to France, right? Or you're going to Paris, or you're going to Italy, or any of these types of places, is that the only opportunity for you to be able to have a really authentic version of a macaron? No. And granted, and this was one of I wrote a New York Times op-ed about this. Granted, this was one of the criticisms. It's like, yeah, but you live in New York or you're from LA.
Yeah.
Access. Like, but I would argue. So now when you travel, and now when you talk about food in its next instance, right? And by the way, the Bourdain thing. So if the Bourdain effect was Bourdain going to Vietnam for the first time to expose Vietnamese food for largely an American audience, then it became, hey, go to a certain place with someone from that culture, right? So then you started to see the on the road with, you go with Batali to Italy. You go with it was that.
Mm-hmm.
And now when you go, you're not going to Italy or you're not going to France with Eric Ripert only for, or Jean-Georges or someone like this. You're not only going to have French food. Now, in actuality, when you go to France, I think it's you have an opportunity to go to like the 14th district where you're having, Vietnamese cuisine or Chinese cuisine, right?
Yeah.
You're having, this all started from an idea where it's no longer novel. And you have access to so many good things everywhere. Technology and travel are so deflationary, right? You have more modern access to anything in the world than you've ever had before. So now, when you do go, why not go into the things that are novel, that are being created right in front of you? And that's what we think third cultures are.
Yeah, when I went to Paris, I haven't been to Vietnam, so the best pho of my life I had in Paris, which is probably like the closest I think you could get. And obviously, we can talk about colonization and migration and the reason why there's so much good Vietnamese food in Paris. But I think after having a couple of days of French food, I just was like, no, I need some good pho to reset the vibe.
For sure.
You need to get the butter out of your system.
Yeah, I had to get like a lot of lime and herbs and stuff in to cleanse it out a little bit.
So yeah, that, and you mentioned colonization, because history, like a plate is history. You know what I mean? Like it's an embodiment of all of these things, like as much as like Italians like to claim that pizza was always an Italian thing. I mean, yeah, but it was a part of Italy before it unified and became Italy, right? It was something that, like, tomatoes didn't originate from that region. Like, it came from the Americas, right? So that alone, like if you're asking somebody 1,000 years ago, like, hey, were you eating tomatoes? Like, yo, in that part of the world, it's like a different conversation. Kimchi didn't always use chilies, right?
Right, yeah.
So
I mean, Thai food, they didn't have chili peppers in Thailand,
yeah.
and that's the most essential
all
thing.
These things happen because of history. And I think third cultures, as we see it now, is, for instance, like when people say Tex-Mex or Mex-Tex, that's a culture of its own. And this is not just like in particular hubs like metropolitan, these global cities like New York, LA, Paris, and Tokyo. I'm talking like there's these border towns and these specific niches that have this history, this interesting, unique perspectives. Like, for instance, like, why is there so many Japanese people in Peru? Like, why is there, this growing Nigerian and Bangladeshi population in South Korea, out of all places?
Yeah. So what? And we live in New York, where the question is always asked, like, and there's such a deep history, a relatively young but still deep history of like, what is an American, right? Or all of these things, but not only just in America, all over the world are changing. What's it mean to be French? Go look at the French national soccer team. What's it mean to be French? They're all byproducts of third culture, right? What's it mean to be Spanish now? What's it mean to be, and it's happening all over the world, right? And so we think that not only is that what our society is, that's certainly where, in the space that we occupy, which is food, that's also happening.
Yeah, I loved talking with you guys about this. I could talk about it all day, but I want to be conscious of our time. So I want to hear a little bit from you both about what you have planned for the future of Righteous Eats.
So I think it's two parts. On the content side, we want to get into just different surfaces, right? We've always been very conscious about trying to go to the space where there was an opportunity to do something new. So for us, when we were doing short form content on TikTok and on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, it was new. People weren't telling those types of stories on that platform. Now we wanted to continue to go to another space. If it's not a new space, it could even be an older space where people aren't using that. So what's that mean? We're going to come out with a TV series called Third Cultures,
Cool.
which we just shot a pilot for.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll see. Wish us luck.
Yeah.
You're speaking it into existence.
Because it's a process, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing that we're here in this office, because with that, we also want to do a book. So that's on. Oh, we're actually launching a podcast too, also kind of apropos to where we are.
Yeah.
That we're actually very excited about. So the podcast, a lot of people know us right now for being the people that might tell you the best spot to go to in Corona, right?
Even though I never said it was the best spot,
Yeah.
it seems like they kind of just assume.
Actually, they
But
expect
because
you to push you on.
Right, because the curation itself is a process of elimination.
Totally.
So, they ask us, yo, you the food guy. Yo, tell me where the best spot to go eat dumplings,
Yeah.
but
That's also like the format of video that people consume, right? It's
Totally.
always like,
Yeah.
yo, this is the best place for dumplings.
I mean, Jaeki, you've done 6 videos on actually I don't do food reviews.
Yeah, and but people don't
listen.
People don't listen.
Yeah, but the podcast, we're really excited about it because I guess if you had to describe it in a business term, we're B2C in that our consumers are our audience. And most people that are in that audience want recommendations and discovery. I think where we're going to go, and with this new podcast, which we have 8 episodes already in the can, we're going to be much more B2B. So it's a lot more of the nuanced industry stuff, right? So like, how do you, when I talk about what POS system are you using, what are you doing for loyalty, how are you retargeting, how did you actually start this business, what makes a business successful? So it's all the people in the restaurant space talking in depth about that. And to your point earlier about the types of guests that you have on this podcast, it really ranges from, the people that we have are also people that we've been connected to, that people that watch Righteous Eats might not necessarily know that we're connected to. For example, we had my buddy Peter on. He has Chip City. Mm-hmm. That's a Danny Meyer backed, Gracious Hospitality funded cookie concept with 50 locations. Right after him, we had Jaeki, who's a single unit operator, the first Black-owned patisserie in Bed-Stuy, right? And then we had Pete Wells on. We're going to have Eric Repair on next week. So it really runs the gamut as far as people that are doing interesting things in food, both on the business side. It's more about the business of food, specifically. And then on the IRL side, you could talk about what we're doing.
Yeah. So on the IRL side, it's funny. So yesterday I was talking to a friend about how now there are all these apps tackling loneliness, and I feel like the human connection is only going to be more in demand. But before all these like think pieces started to come out, like we've always felt the need to connect with people. So even if we're not profiting, or even if we're not charging the community members coming to these places, we'll make sure that the restaurant's good, obviously. So we've been indexing into IRL from the very beginning. So going into this year and the years following, we really want to build upon that and make it more of a regular thing. So whether that is funded by brands, so in like one particular example that I like to bring up a lot is, so Coca-Cola reached out and they wanted me to participate in this campaign, and they usually give like these very vague briefs, like, "Yo, we want you to celebrate a moment." I was like, "The fuck does that mean?" But so I went back to them and told them, like, "Listen, I'll do a moment, as in literally buying out a restaurant for dinner." And what I would do is I'll make content around that moment. So you guys get your deliverable agency, XYZ, and the restaurant gets paid because I'm going to buy it out. My community members get to come and eat for free. Everybody wins. So that was like an example of a branded IRL event, which we replicated not only with Coke, but also with Samsung, also with Oatly, also with On, the sneaker brand. So, yeah, that's one part of our business. But also we want to start doing things maybe that is more direct to consumer without having a brand involved. As in, like we can't keep having these events that are completely free, right? Because we also need to be able to figure out how can we bring dollars, like direct dollars to these eateries, and but do it in a way where is equitable, do it in a way where the actual people that want to try out these restaurants could feel like they have some skin in the game as well. Yeah. Right? So this is like an idea that we're still you'll see marinating on. Yeah. So maybe we could offline about it, because I'd love to learn your takes on, like, because you speak to restaurateurs and people in food all the time. I want to know, like, what are your thoughts about, like, an ideal event? Like, what is like a price point that people are willing to pay? Well,
to give a bit more context, I think the idea, simply put, is a supper club. We just don't know which version of the supper club we want to do yet.
Right.
Yeah, we should talk.
Yeah.
We'll talk off mic, but in the show notes, in addition to linking to all the businesses that we've talked about, I'll throw all your links in there. So people who are listening who want to catch up on all of these endeavors know where to do that. And to close today, I want to play a quick rapid fire game with you. I'm going to make you like choose some favorites.
Oh, no, I suck at this.
It doesn't have to be, a lot of things do start with the word best, but we can maybe just think of it as like the first place that comes into your head. Your favorite right now.
Your favorite right now.
In this specific moment in time.
At this very particular moment.
Yeah. Okay. Do you guys want to decide who's going to go first?
You should go first,
Oh,
bro.
you just pointed at each other. Okay,
yeah.
Brian, I'm going to make you go first. Okay. Your favorite spot for like a quick bite in New York?
Balad, the Mediterranean like productivity bowl place right by our our we work. Yeah.
Okay, Jaeki.
Brancaccios on Fort Hamilton Parkway in Kensington, Brooklyn.
Your favorite diner?
So, my favorite diner.
Is Katz a diner technically?
It's a deli. I think we'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite diner. Oh man, they all closed. They all used to be in Queens.
Yeah.
Right now, as of late, is this diner called Purity Diner, Little Purity or Purity Diner, is on 7th Avenue in Brooklyn.
Incredible name.
Yeah, Purity. Yeah, in Park Slope.
Okay. Your favorite bar?
Well, I stopped drinking, so but favorite bar probably Nebulous, the Jose Andres.
Yeah, because
they have a great view. They always
he
take
took
care
us
of
there.
Yeah, they always
he
take
took
care
us
of
there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely biased. But yeah, no, I don't even drink like that, bro. Man.
You can skip it if you need to.
Yeah, I don't really have a favorite bar.
Okay, your favorite like late night snack?
Oh, my favorite late night snack. So it's late night. I think I gotta put that as the context.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Proper late
when
night.
you're late at night, you're probably
Like 2 a.m. late?
You're probably intoxicated. You know what I mean? Your decision making isn't really quite there. Having said all that, there's a spot inside this supermarket in Flushing on Northern Boulevard. This Korean supermarket called Hanyang is a 24-hour joint. The produce isn't as fresh as H-Mart, but it's 24 hours. So inside that particular supermarket, there is a late night, this eatery that sells like just very basic Korean staples that are more like, they call it punshik, which is like, is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like snacks, but it's not necessarily snacks. So like kimbap, for instance, right? Like the rice roll, that's considered a punshik. So they also serve like tteokbokki, which is like rice cakes smothered in red chili paste, along with sundae, which is Korean blood sausage. So they serve all of that in this particular location. I don't even know what it's called, but as long as I can remember, it was always coexisted within this particular supermarket.
So you don't know the name?
I don't know the name.
It's inside the
It's
Hanyang.
inside the Hanyang supermarket on Northern Boulevard in Flushing.
This is a proper recommendation when it doesn't have a name, but you're describing it by what it's nearby.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's that.
What's
That's
your late
my
night?
late night spot.
Mine would also be something on 32nd, a stew. At Kunjip, maybe. Kunjip, like a kalbitang or a sarlongtang or something like that.
Oh, yeah, and I also got to just shout out Steinway. Late night, Steinway Street in Astoria, Queens, situations. I don't even know what I'm eating at that point. I don't even smoke cigarettes, but I might even want to smoke a cigarette. You know what I mean? And,
It's like
hit
the
up
foreign
a hookah
country
joint.
or 2 a.m.
Pretty
Exactly.
much.
clause.
Yeah.
Okay, final question. A spot that you want to shout out to get more love in New York?
A spot that I want. Can you rephrase the question?
Just like any place in New York that you think more people should go to.
A place in New York that.
Mine is Main Street Imperial Gourmet, a Taiwanese spot in on Main Street in Queens. Yeah.
Oh man.
Anything on Righteous Eats.
This one is a little tough, but when you said one of my fond food memories after China, after I immigrated to the U.S., like the first food that I went out of my way, using my own money, using my allowance to go to purchase, was at this Filipino restaurant called Renee's in Woodside on Roosevelt Ave. So it's that. And that was actually one of the first Righteous Eats episode that we ever did before we even started the Righteous Eats channel. So I would highly recommend Renee's Kitchenette, just because it was like the first restaurant that as a kid, like maybe 10, 11 years old, I had maybe like $10, $15 on me, and I went over there and I got myself a Filipino spaghetti, which is like a weird concoction to begin with, but is incredible. And so yeah, I want to shout out Renee's.
These are all such great recs, and I've had so much fun talking with both of you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having us. How do you guys end this? Just end it just like that?
Yeah.
It's like an NPR.
Do you want to like drop
like
something
a
at the end?
PBS situation. It's like, y'all don't do one of those. Yo, shout out to Righteous Eats.
Air horn.
You know, shout out to Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, Staten Island.
Okay, we'll throw that in.
Eliza, we're back with three things. How are you?
I'm good, Matt. I'm excited to talk about what's been up for us lately.
We have some recs here. We have some things that are on our mind. I'm going to start. I was in San Francisco recently, and I'm going to have a great San Francisco episode in the next month. And I made plenty of visits and saw lots of friends and can't wait to share all of those stops. But my first of three things is a coffee shop in San Francisco. I was just there, and I was having a meal with our friend Mackenzie Chung Fagan, and she was like, "You got to go check this out. It's a pop-up. It's on Clement Street in the Richmond. I had not been there in years, and man, the Richmond is absolutely popping. There's so many new spots opening, so much energy on the street. I love that neighborhood. But they're operating at the acclaimed wine bar High Treason, and it's only on the weekends, or it's only Thursday through Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's a coffee pop-up, and it is from Luis Gonzalez and Nathan Cruz. And these two folks have worked in coffee, and they are baristas, but they also live in the neighborhood, and were like, we should do coffee at this empty wine bar during the day, and the owner agreed, and they're off to the races. It was a fun vibe there. They're doing a kind of a limited menu. They're doing like cortado. They're doing pour-overs from Dot Coffee from Amsterdam. And really their big, the drink that they're most famous for that I got to try that's delicious is their Cafe Dola, which is a cinnamon cappuccino. And it was delicious. And I spotted some vinyls. They were playing vinyls. There was a DJ there playing some French disco, but I spotted Blow Out Comb from the Diggable Planets was on deck. So I'm just loving the vibe, right? Great album, right? Great one. So they're called High Energy in San Francisco. I love what these guys are doing.
I want to go there. That's so fun.
Your vibe. I was like, Eliza right away. I was like, Eliza would like this place.
I wish I was there.
It was very cool. What's your first thing?
My first thing is that I went to a really fun pop-up last week. My buddy Keith Sue, who is formerly from the cooking collective See You Soon, that has done a lot of great pop-ups all over the world, and Tristan Kwan, who goes by Fruit Som here in New York, teamed up to do like a Cantonese Canadian-American pop-up at Rodora. Everything on this menu was just so delicious and fun. They did turbo prawn thermidor is what they called it. So these huge prawns with that thermidor preparation, but with XO sauce on top. Super delicious. They did like a terrine with chung fun noodles on top. So this really like shreddy, delicious beef shank tendon, pork trotter, mustard greens with those tender rice noodles layered on top. Almost like a lasagna kind of vibe. A 3-type of mushroom salad with yuba and fuyu butter sauce. It was also good, and I feel bad mentioning it because the pop-up is over, but I'm hoping that they will team up again and do something similar in New York, and they're chefs that you can both kind of follow on Instagram, and I can drop them in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll drop those notes, and I follow Fruit Som. I just followed that account, and I fucking love it.
You know, Fruit Som is his handle on Instagram, but that was brought into the ethos of the pop-up as well, and every table got a free little fruit plate with really beautiful yellow dragon fruit, fat grapes, pomelo. So in addition to all the fruit on the plate, they also had a hongbao red envelope that had the stickers inside of it. So a little delayed Lunar New Year treat. What's your second thing?
My second thing is from the fine folks at Pistacchio. Pistacchio is the Italian pronunciation of pistachio. I'm not pronouncing it right. But they are, I met them, I think, at Fancy Food or Expo West, and they sent me their new product, and it's been kind of reformulated. It is their spread, but it is now chunky and crunchy and everything I wanted. I think smooth pistachio butter is amazing for cooking and putting in like great baked goods. But when I think of a crunchy pistachio spread, I'm just like stick the spoon in and eat the jar. It's right. I'll just go rip from it and I'll have it all day. It's a beautiful product. and it's founded by Francine Voigt and Nicola Buffo. And
I love pistachio, and that sounds really good.
it's really good stuff. And I think they're using domestic. They were using, I think, Italian and European pistachios before, but now they're using all California, and it's a really nice product. The branding is excellent. I think you've probably seen it at the Shopee shops, pop-up grocer, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this new product is just hitting stores now, and I really like it.
That's awesome. My second thing is that I went to a really fun tasting last night that Casa Dragones, the tequila brand, was doing at Tokyo Record Bar. I'm a big fan of Casa Dragones. I think on the kind of higher end of tequila, they're doing really cool things. My favorite thing that I got to have last night was their reposado that they're doing, that they age in Mezunara casks, which are a Japanese oak that's traditionally used for Japanese whiskey. And the tequila gets this kind of oaky, smoky, all of those delicious flavors. I had it in a Paloma, which was quite good, but then I think sipping it straight, I really just got to appreciate all of the nuance of that, which was super cool. I also got to chat a little bit with Berta Gonzalez Nieves, who's the CEO of Casa Dragones and the co-founder. She also was the first woman to be certified as a maestra tequilera by the Tequila Regulatory Council in Mexico, which, I would love for there to be many women that have that level, and I think there are more now, but I really respect Berta for starting this brand and for gaining that level of expertise and recognition with tequila. So I think as it starts to get a little bit warmer and I'm thinking about like what the drink of the summer might be, or even just what I want to be drinking, like that tequila is always going to be in my mind.
Yeah, I got to go down to San Miguel de Allende and hang out with Berta years ago and got to try some tequilas back in my tequila days. And I so agree. I think Berta is an incredible distiller and business person, and this is a beautiful product. They're always innovating and having new aging techniques, and I'm a big fan.
What's your last thing?
My last thing is in the drinks game as well, but it's in the NA game, and I am very excited about a new NA beer that was introduced to me recently. It's not new per se. It's called Visitor. Have you heard of Visitor at all?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I hadn't either, and I think it's around the Midwest. I know that my friends in Chicago have been drinking it for a while, and it's a beer that's founded by Rob Jensen. He's one of the co-founders of Pitchfork, our favorite, or many people's favorites, music publication. And I can't wait to chat with Rob at some point about this great beer. And what's interesting is that they're not like getting too in the weeds with flavor profiles. There's not like a style list. They're not doing like hoppy IPAs or a Kolsch. They're not naming it anything. They're really just doing IPA and extra IPA. Those are the two beers they sell. The cans are super iconic. They're silver and have a little bit of branding on it, but they're mostly silver. So they're not like overselling. It's kind of an understated beer. It's a really clean IPA, and the extra is obviously extra hopped. And if that's your style, this one will be good. And I just love seeing new NAs like pop up, and creative people are trying to market it in bars. And I just think bar owners out there need to expand their NA beer selections. Just having athletics shouldn't cut it. There's plenty of great independent, smaller NA beers that are popping up, and one of these is Visitor. So if you listen to the show and you have a bar, please check out Visitor NA beer. Do you have a final one, Eliza?
Yeah. Okay. So I want to use this moment to talk about the thing I've been cooking a lot at home, which are tofu scrambles.
Oh, yeah.
Do you enjoy a tofu scramble?
So I used to work at a health food store when I was a teenager, and I think I took home one of those really like those shelf-stable tofus and tried making a tofu scramble, and I did not have great results, so I've always been scarred for it. So my answer is no.
So I really love a tofu scramble. I think partially because I don't like to eat eggs. Yeah. So a tofu scramble is a good kind of savory breakfast option that still is delivering protein, and I think can actually be kind of similar to an egg in terms of what you put on a plate. But not to brag, I make really good ones.
Oh, yeah.
I make them for my friends who think that they're not going to like a tofu scramble, and they do. And I think that there are a couple factors that make a good tofu scramble. So I wanted to share those for
please.
My final three things. I think the first one obviously is getting the water out of the tofu, which you could press the tofu ahead of time, or because you're, breaking it down into chunks, I just kind of rip off a handful and squeeze it out over the sink. Clean hands, obviously.
Quick question.
Yes.
What style of tofu?
I use firm tofu.
Firm, okay, great.
That's just the tofu that I keep on hand in my kitchen in general. So that's what I use for the scramble. But I think it's a good texture because it can still be a little like toothsome, and basically squeeze it out, cook it in the pan without any oil or anything in it, just to kind of burn off some of that extra water. Then I add oil or butter, get it crispy. Then I add in what I'm using to flavor it, which lately has been a combination of like grated garlic, miso, and tomato paste, just
Wow.
for a little bit of that umami. And then I hit it with turmeric and a lot of this ranch powder that Ham and Sola Alwaley did for Burlap and Barrel that has nutritional yeast and powdered buttermilk in it, and garlic, and I think oregano and basil, some other herbs. It just has a ton of umami, and it just kind of coats everything together really nicely. Hit it with a little bit of lime juice, maybe a little bit of maple syrup if I want it to be like a tiny bit sweet too. And then it's just so good on a plate with steamed greens or sweet potatoes or avocado. I did it with herby rice over the weekend for a friend of mine. And I just think more people should be making tofu scrambles. So this was my moment.
Amazing, Eliza. I think you've got great instincts. It's beautiful to hear that you're going with maple syrup or ranch or both.
Yeah, maple syrup. It sounds crazy to say I'm doing miso, tomato paste, maple syrup, and ranch powder, but I promise when you taste it, it all just adds up to be really umami forward and delicious. And I'll even do it as meal prep kind of for the week and just have it on hand, because you could, put it into a burrito if you wanted, or you could just eat it on toast. I'm a fan.
Love that. I'm gonna do this, actually. I feel like you've inspired me.
Report back.
I will. Thanks for sharing your 3 things.
You too. This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.